Welcome back to another Henry J video. I'm going to try something a little different. Probably not going to see as well as I would like, but here's one of the things that a couple people have asked me about, and I figure I might as well take a minute and kind of show you. This is an American Auto Wire generic 20 circuit kit. I like them because it's a very high quality wire, it's very complete. They give you pretty much everything you want. In fact, I'm getting ready to sort it into bins to make it easier to find connectors. It's very similar to their vehicle specific and hot rod style, like everything else I ever do. However, it is pretty bare bones as far as what's already terminated and what's what. Obviously no firewall pass through. As you saw in the Pontiac, remember I harvested an older one and I'm making one. This vehicle doesn't need it. We've already fitted this block probably a year ago to the chassis, so I have a location, and in fact here's the studs that will be used to mount it. So that's all taken care of, but I still have to finish sorting out what all I need. In this car, in fact, let me bring you around, I have a fuel injection system, so that's going to need to be part of the harness. I have an ignition system, has to be part of the harness. Let's see, what else do we have? We have a fuel system, which is of course an electric fuel pump. Going to need that in the harness. This has power seats that are even heated, so those will have to become part of the harness. I'm going to leave a high power set of leads for future stereo, which will be part of doing the interior. We do have a Dakota dash, but I'm going to have to provide signals for that. We have a heater, going to have to include that in the harness. Turn signals, dimmer switches, horn relay, all that stuff is what you got to think about, including, the simple basic stuff, like tail lights, which on this vehicle are going to be fun. But those are the things. Oh, this one also has a license plate flipper. Gonna have to run a power line for that as well. So, electric fans, another setup. Headlights, another setup. Parking lights, turn signal switching, all of that has to be thought out, and it's best to think about it now. One thing that's nice with these kits is they've already kind of grouped everything in the most basic ways that things tend to be run. So you do have a fuse box, you can see an awful lot of locations, and then just wires coming off of them. And they do rough group them. Now, I've gone through this once and have moved some of the grouping a year ago, so I'm just getting back onto it. But you can see, they're looking at the basic things. You're going to have a way to control and cycle power, run the starter, so you're going to need an ignition switch. So you've got that set up. We're going to need to bring power in on an engine harness. We're going to have to, somewhere in here should be an engine harness, but you got to have an alternator. We've got to be able to control everything on the engine side. Now everything is going to go through the firewall, which I don't have a light out here, but we did already pre-drill a hole there. So we knew that was going to happen. So with this project, unlike a lot of other ones when I do them, I need to already know what is going through before I go installing anything. So before I start taping or actual zip tying harnesses and getting things managed, I really just want everything pointed in the direction I want it to go. So common things you're always going to see. I mean, if you've done trailer work, these colors. You got your left and your right, your parking light, your fuel sender, so those are all going to go to the back. You're going to recognize common colors for dashes, gray and white, common GM colors, I should say. Everything going for the ignition switch here. This is a breakout harness, which is common in most of their kits, and hopefully is on this page. Yes, so you get your accessory feeds, and that's going to be some of the oddly labeled. Let's see if we can find that. So accessory feeds. Okay, so when we look at that, it gives us 6 additional circuits, some of which are going to be battery, ignition, on some kits, there's also some that are hooked up to accessory. In this kit, it's either battery or ignition. So battery means it's always hooked up, which is great for clocks and reminders. But remember, it's always hooked up. So even if you're not in the car with a key, it's on the battery. Anything ignition, as long as the ignition cylinder isn't turned to the off position, you have power. And that's going to work great for feeding our fuel pump, for feeding our power seats. We don't currently have power locks. We don't have power windows. But, those are options that are labeled and everything for the future. Now, one thing that's nice with these is, as you can see, the wire is, it's actual decent size. So, they do size appropriately. They also recommend, common fuse sizes for each circuit. Take this with a grain of salt. Use the fuse that makes sense for your application. Never use a fuse bigger than the wire you have or the accessory you have. I find they tend to be quite conservative based on their wire gauges. You're not going to see a ton of voltage drop, which is good. But if you have, a radio circuit that only needs a 2 amp fuse, don't put a 20 amp circuit on that. You can still hook up the wiring at 20 amps, but go ahead and throw a 5 amp fuse in there and call it good. Let the fuses do their job. Now, just like any Delco series or Delphi series setup, this is all just crimped bus bar. Some of these circuits are easy to move. Some of these are difficult to move. Try to keep notes on what you're hooking up where, because just because something says a specific word doesn't mean that's what you have to put there. You get a lot of freedom in this type of harness. However, it's nice that they've already thought of the main things. A 69 and later GM column switch. This is where your turn signals and everything will come from, which is great, as well as the horn feed. They do include a horn relay, which is typical for these kits. So you can bury that up under the dash. It's nice and simple. Let's see. You probably recognize a standard GM headlight switch. One thing I prefer to do with these is mount a couple relays out in the engine bay near the battery source, so that we're not even running any current through the ignition switch. This is going to be feeds for stereo, so you should have power, battery, dimmer, and ground. Let's see, what else do we have? Typical, front harness. You're going to have that. That's going to go through the firewall. And of course, then courtesy lighting. And the way courtesy lighting works in these cars is all those light bulbs and everything are hot. And then a few strategic locations, a ground is provided by an interrupter switch or something along that line. So like in this case, one, it does also go to the ignition switch. So you can, or the headlight switch, you can turn them on by grounding that white wire. Or in most older vehicles, you're going to have some variation of this switch. So right now, it's physically out, and it's grounded the body, and that white wire is grounded. So all courtesy lights are now lit. But if I take that ground away, they're not. But remember, those are always, always, always on the battery. So play accordingly there. So those are a pretty easy system to set up. And I will use some of the mid-70s style plastic. If you've seen any of my videos, you've seen me use them before. I may actually be out of them right now, but they're pretty common. It's just a little plastic kit that takes a small 67 series bulb or like a 1156 LED or something like that for the courtesy lights. They mount up real nice. They're real easy. They're very inexpensive, and they're easy to get. But in a universal kit like this, that's my responsibility to get that. So all they give me is the lead-in. Now, one thing with these kits, they tend to, instead of trying to daisy chain or have separate bundles of wire, what they do, even though they know you're going to be hitting multiple points, they just put the whole length on the wire. So you run this to the first spot. Well, not this, but you would run this to the first location, cut it. Now the remainder of that wire is the feed to the next location. So there's plenty of wire here. Especially, I mean, you could run this almost to the back of the Pontiac right here. So, and then, you know, I do hold on to the leftover bits of wire. They're handy to have. But unfortunately, a custom build like this, you're not going to get a kit that's going to actually be for this application. So, you know, that's what's great about these universal kits. And it's not just auto wire. I mean, a lot of people make these kits. You've got the real simple ones from Ron Francis and them, where it's just the thing in the terminal blocks and you just put, you know, crimp a spade, pop it on there, turn it down. It takes up a lot of space. It's very heavy, but for someone who doesn't have the tools or doesn't want to deal with actually doing all the work, it is kind of convenient. During this project, I will try to remember to show how some of the different connectors work, how some of the different tools work, and some of the things I like to do. Everybody's got a way they like to do things. Over the last couple years, I've really migrated to this Tessa tape. This is great, and you see a lot of OEMs using it. It's very low tack, so it's easy to undo. It doesn't get all sticky like PVC does over time, which is really nice. It seems to be pretty abrasion resistant compared to some of your plastic tapes. And it does a great job of bundling things, keeping things tidy, and it's very, very cheap. A roll of it is about $1.99, and you can see there's probably 3 or 4 bundles like this. I think this is $10, you know, and that's what, 5 or 6 rolls. That's great. The other thing, that's going to matter with these kits, because you know this kit isn't based on just doing barrel crimps. Although, you know, you'll see they do include generic things that you may or may not need. However, they do expect you to still be able to do 56 and 58 series and 59 series crimps. So it is nice to have the correct tools. Now this progressive tool like this, not that expensive. It does have a lock, which is great. So, oh, and you can just buy them in bulk, which is really, really nice. So let me run through one real quick. Let me put on I'm an old man goggles. So let's just grab something common. So we were going to place this little lock tab in the retainer, let the gate come down, and hopefully this shows up. You can see how the gate can really mess things up. So if it was in too far, the gate can't push it out. But if it's in this way too far, it can actually cause problems. So just pay attention. But one thing that's nice about the gate went on, you know, which I use with my single. I don't have one for my double. Let's just grab a piece of wire real quick. You know, nice strippers, also a really great thing to have. And then all you got to do, even though I don't really need this here, place it in, and I go, I want the insulation just a tiny bit more. Grab the cutters. And the beauty with the ratcheting style like this is, okay, now it's just now starting to crimp. As you're bringing it down, you can hear this ratchet going. As soon as the ratchet pops right there, you have a complete crimp. Now, another nice feature of the gate on these is it held it. But when you look here, and I'm going to look and make sure it's showing up pretty well, you can see that is a nice crimp. It doesn't have too much wire in it. We've got good retention on the insulation. That's what we're looking for. So having the correct tool, you know, this one's a lifesaver. However, for wide crimps or 59 series or anything that's wide, you know, I just have a manual. You gotta got to use your arms kind of thing, well, your hands. And then for barrel style connectors, I do have, you know, the correct crimps for them for insulated and non-insulated that are also ratcheting so you can't overdo them. However, you don't have to have these. You know, one, they're not free, and two, I mean, if you're only doing one kit, it's hard to justify the tool. So if you can't borrow one from somebody, just go get, you know, one of those ones that comes in pretty much every little electric kit. They work fine. They're just a little harder on your hands. So, but for these kind of things, whenever possible, I try to have as many different connector options available as I need. Also, not only can you buy them from various places this way, you can also buy kits of the wires. So, especially for back shells, that's really the thing. Back shells are the thing you're always going to be fighting trying to find. You know, a single terminal lock and a T double terminal lock, that's all fine and dandy, but you're going to start getting into weird ones that what I tend to do is actually harvest those. So, well, in fact, you can see these are both used. So you can see, you know, when I'm pulling out an old harness, I keep all of these. And then I've got various boxes full of old back shells. You know, ignition switch. Well, okay, this is the kind of terminals that go in to a console for a first gen F body or X body. Well, it would be second gen X body, but you know, headlight sockets. I mean, anything that's going to be difficult for you to get or source, or is still in just fine shape and there's no reason not to reuse the housing, you might as well try to save. Grommets. Every grommet. Save grommets. You never know if they're going to be useful again. Light sockets. Always handy. Also, these are easy to make. You don't have to buy them pre-made. They're real easy to make. So, you know, you can save a lot of hassle and a lot of time just saving some connectors. And quite a few of these will wind up in this project. So, and you'd be surprised how clean most of this stuff is when you harvest it compared to what you're expecting. So, yeah. Oh, if you're working on older vehicles, always keep some fusible link. You know, modern vehicles don't do that anymore, but older ones do, and sometimes those suckers burn up, and it's good to have some. So, let's see what else. Relay terminals and kits like that, you know, I think I've shown all that in previous videos about buying shells and stuff. Try to make things as serviceable in the field as you can. It may seem silly to put a connector in some areas, but if you're out on power tour and something goes bad, every now and then being able to take something off and take it to the parts store with a buddy to get something, that's kind of nice. So it depends on what you're doing. But yeah, so that's kind of that. And of course that's going to kick on. So I'm going to call that for right now. Okay, starting to kind of pull some of this back together. It's been a little while, so the memory's hazy. Obviously I don't need an oil pressure switch and a temp sender because the Dakota Dash has a little control box and it comes with its own senders and its own wire harnesses, so I don't need those single wires. I've got a bunch of grounds that are going to be handy, especially for the headlights. So just kind of combing through, pulling out what doesn't need to be there, getting ready to grab a light and try to remember which way I had this oriented. I usually try to make them vertical, but you know, I got to work with what you got for room. So yeah, that's kind of where this is falling. Just kind of going through notes and, you know, trying to figure out the right way to do this and start marking down what's what. So yeah. Oh, and the other series of connectors that I use all the time that I forgot to mention are the weather packs. You know, these things that GM used forever and ever and ever. They're great. They're cheap. They're cheerful. They're easy to use. They're very inexpensive. The tool for them is pretty straightforward. Yeah, they're great. You can get a whole bunch of them. Here's the other tool you need. This is the pin popper. This is the crimper. They're real simple, real inexpensive, and you can set them up all kinds of ways. You know, you pick different shells. You can, you know, pick different number of connectors. You can change even, you know, like these are all females here, but you could put 2 males in there to index it so it couldn't be plugged in wrong. They're very, very nice. This has been another ShopRex approved video. Thanks for watching.